Most people around the world think of floods as something simple. Rain falls, rivers swell, gullies overflow, streets turn into streams, and water eventually finds its way back to the sea. It sounds predictable, almost routine, but every now and then nature ignores the script and does something that leaves even seasoned engineers scratching their heads. That is exactly what happened in the quiet community of Content in Manchester after Hurricane Melissa passed. The storm was long gone, the clouds had cleared, and the sun was back out. People expected to sweep mud from their yards, cut fallen branches, and return to normal life. But instead, they woke up to something far more unsettling. Water was rising, slowly, steadily, and from the ground itself. The very first frames of the video capture this eerie calm. The kind of calm that tells you something is wrong even before anyone says a word. Cars stretch along the roadside, as if people have arrived for a village gathering. Small groups stand together near the edge of the water. Some people whisper, others look confused, and a few just stare silently at what used to be their yards. Even church members walking home in their Sabbath clothes stop to observe. They are still dressed in white shirts, long skirts, and carefully polished shoes, yet none of them rush home. They stand with the rest of the community in disbelief. What they're looking at is not a puddle, not a gully overflow, and not even a river out of its banks. They're looking at a piece of land slowly turning into a lake. At first glance, you might think it's just stagnant rainwater left behind by Melissa. After all, Jamaica has seen dozens of storms, and pooling water is nothing new. But the stillness tells another story. This water isn't draining. It isn't moving. It sits there, calm and deep, like a pond that has lived in the same place for years. Residents tell the cameraman that the water has been like this for days. They describe how trucks came to pump it out, and how the hoses churned for hours with no success. When the pumping ended, the water level remained exactly the same, not a centimeter lower. That observation alone unlocks the first clue. This isn't surface water. This is water being replenished from below. To understand why this is happening, you must look beneath Manchester's surface, literally. The parish sits on a giant foundation of limestone, and limestone is one of the most porous, absorbent, and easily carved rocks on the planet. Rainwater does not simply run off limestone terrain the way it does on clay or granite. Instead, it sinks in. Over thousands of years, water has eaten away at the limestone, carving tunnels, caves, deep cavities, narrow channels, and sinkholes. This is called karst topography, and it is a world completely hidden from the surface. Imagine a vast underground plumbing system stretching for miles in every direction. Under normal circumstances, this system works beautifully. Rainwater flows through these channels, moves quietly beneath people's feet, and eventually travels toward lower ground. In fact, this underground network is one of the reasons why Manchester's aquifers have supplied towns like Mandeville with good drinking water for generations. The system is natural, efficient, and usually invisible. But limestone systems are delicate. If water enters too quickly, or if the channels become blocked, or if the ground becomes oversaturated, everything changes. That is what made Hurricane Melissa so dangerous. The storm brought an enormous amount of rainfall in a short period of time. Manchester's underground world soaked up the water at first, but heavy downpours continued hour after hour, pushing the aquifer to its limit. Eventually, every underground cavity filled. Every hidden river swelled. Every cave, crack, and pocket reached capacity. When that happens, the water does not politely wait for a way out. Pressure builds, and the water begins to force its way upward. The same ground that normally absorbs water suddenly begins to release it. Hydrologists from the Water Resources Authority observed something extraordinary. Groundwater levels in parts of Manchester rose almost 100 meters within weeks. That kind of rise is the hydrological equivalent of a quiet pond turning into a geyser, slow but relentless. When groundwater rises that fast, it doesn't just sit quietly beneath the surface. It pushes, it seeps, it climbs. It finds its way through cracks that people never notice, through gaps in foundations, along sinkholes that are centuries old, and sometimes straight through the floors of homes. Residents who live close to the flooded areas describe hearing strange sound in the early morning: dripping, rushing, gurgling. Water appeared at back doors, seeped under verandas, and crept through kitchens. For some families, the water climbed so quickly they had minutes to gather children, pets, and important documents before leaving. Homes built on the lowest sections of land suffered the most. In some places, the water rose so high that only roof peaks and window tops remained visible. Entire yards were swallowed in silence. No waves, no movement, just a still body of water covering everything. And while this feels unusual, Manchester residents with long memories have seen this before. In 2002, 2003, and 2005, communities such as Newmarket, New River, Porus, and Harmons experienced similar events. Those floods did not come from rivers or gullies either. They came from beneath the earth. Sinkholes filled more than 100 feet deep. Roads vanished. People used makeshift rafts to travel between houses. Some communities waited months before the water finally drained into the underground systems again. What makes this type of flooding so dangerous is that it can last far longer than regular surface floods. Scientists believe the same chain reaction is unfolding again. Heavy rainfall saturates the limestone. Underground channels fill, and the excess water forces its way upward. But there is a growing conversation around the idea that human development might be making things worse. When people build houses over old sinkholes, clear forests, or pave areas that used to absorb water, they unintentionally choke off natural drainage routes. Limestone landscapes rely on these natural holes and cracks to move water. Block them, and the entire underground system becomes more fragile. Even highways, when placed in the wrong locations, can redirect water and interfere with old drainage paths that have existed for centuries. Around the world, engineers have documented similar problems in limestone regions. When natural sinkholes are filled, or when development covers the land with concrete, groundwater has fewer places to escape. During storms, the pressure builds until the water erupts upward. That is why Manchester's flooding cannot be solved with traditional ideas like widening culverts or digging bigger drains. Those solutions work in parishes where water flows above ground. Manchester's water crisis begins below. The video shows residents trying every method they know to manage the situation. Some dig channels by hand, hoping to direct the floodwater towards sinkholes that might relieve the pressure underground. The footage shows water rushing through these newly dug trenches with surprising speed, proof that the underground system is still overflowing. Without these improvised channels, the flood would have spread much farther, taking more homes with it. But stagnant groundwater brings another layer of danger. When water sits for weeks, mosquitoes thrive. The Ministry of Health monitors these situations closely because outbreaks of mosquito-borne illnesses can follow rising groundwater events. With families displaced and homes surrounded by stagnant water, vector control becomes critical. A flood like this is not just a water problem. It is a public health problem. Despite everything, life continues. The video captures a funeral procession passing through the area. The cars carefully navigating between standing water and parked vehicles. Even in crisis, Jamaicans continue their rituals, obligations, and responsibilities. Scenes like this remind viewers that disasters do not pause everyday life. People still mourn, worship, cook, work, and take care of children even when the world around them has changed overnight. As you watch the calm surface of the floodwater, it becomes clear that the real story is not the water itself. The real story is the hidden landscape below Manchester. A landscape shaped by centuries of rainfall, carved into a maze of underground passages, and pushed beyond its limit by Hurricane Melissa. What happened in content is a rare reminder that nature's most powerful forces often operate where we cannot see them. To understand why Manchester reacts this way, we need to step deeper into the world of limestone geology, because the story unfolding in content is not just a local oddity. It's part of a global pattern seen in many regions built on karst terrain. The word karst describes landscapes where the bedrock, usually limestone, has been shaped by water until it resembles a natural maze. Underground rivers twist and turn through the rock. Caverns open into wide chambers. Narrow channels branch like veins through the earth. In some places, these channels run for miles, silently transporting water from hills to valleys without anyone on the surface ever noticing. This hidden world is what controls Manchester's water until a storm overwhelms it. Karst landscapes can store enormous amounts of water. They act like underground reservoirs without walls, absorbing rainfall faster than most soils. But they also release water in complex ways that depend on the shape of the underground network. When all the cavities are full, the system behaves like a bottle turned upside down. Once it's completely filled, pressure builds, and the water shoots upward wherever it finds an opening. The same natural pathways that quietly accept water on normal days become the routes where water erupts during extreme weather. That is what happened after Hurricane Melissa. The aquifer reached maximum capacity and began to rise through the same cracks it once used to drain. The challenge is that these channels are ancient. They formed over thousands of years, long before towns, roads, and housing developments appeared. Nature carved them according to its own logic, not according to modern land planning, which means people often build on ground that behaves differently from what they expect. A piece of land may look solid on the surface, but beneath it may lie a sinkhole that last opened 50 years ago, or a buried chamber that fills whenever rainfall hits a certain threshold. In a normal year, nothing happens. But when a storm like Melissa arrives, nature remembers those old pathways and sends water rushing through them once again. This is why engineers face such difficulty predicting or preventing the kind of rising groundwater seen in content. Traditional infrastructure focuses on managing surface water, not underground water. But in Manchester's limestone country, the real drama happens below. You cannot widen a gully to release water that is coming from beneath you. You cannot build a higher embankment to stop water that rises from the soil itself. You need an entirely different approach, one that begins with understanding the geological history of the area. When you talk to elders who grew up in Manchester, they speak with quiet authority about places that were once sinkholes or seasonal ponds. Long before scientific reports, these elders learned from memory where water used to rise, where old channels once stood, and where the land tended to shift after heavy rains. Their stories match what scientists now confirm through mapping. Places like New Market, Harmony, New River, and sections of Porous have repeated patterns of rising groundwater after major storms. These places sit along major underground drainage routes, making them more vulnerable during aquifer overload. Content now joins that list. One of the most important questions asked after the Melissa flood is why the water stayed so long. Surface floods from rivers or gullies often disappear within days once the rain stops. But rising groundwater can linger for weeks or even months. The reason lies in the slow nature of underground drainage. When the aquifer is filled to the top, it does not empty quickly. It drains gradually, seeping through narrow passages that act like bottlenecks. If the channels are partially blocked by natural debris, collapsed rock, or sediment carried by the storm, the process slows even more. This means residents can be forced to live with the flood long after the storm has faded from the news cycle. The idea that land development affects this process is not far-fetched. In karst regions across the world, even small alterations in the landscape can disrupt natural drainage. When a sinkhole is filled to create space for construction, water loses one of its escape routes. When vegetation is removed, the soil absorbs less water, forcing more into the underground system at once. When roads block natural depressions, the flow pattern is altered. These changes may seem insignificant in normal weather, but during a storm, they contribute to overload. While scientists still study the exact role development played in Manchester's flood, experience from other countries shows that human activity often magnifies natural vulnerabilities. The footage of residents digging trenches shows how communities respond when formal infrastructure is not enough. These trenches are more than simple channels. They are attempts to reconnect the surface with natural sinkholes, giving water a pathway into the underground system. The speed at which water rushes through these trenches tells a clear story. The pressure beneath the surface was immense. Without those makeshift channels, the water may have spread deeper into the community, adding more families to the growing list of displaced residents. Of course, when you have standing water, another danger quietly grows. Mosquitoes breed rapidly in still water. The Ministry of Health understands this risk and treated the area with caution. After storms, diseases like dengue and chikungunya can surge if water remains for too long. Because rising groundwater can stay for weeks, the risk becomes higher. Vector control isn't a luxury. It's a shield protecting already stressed communities. When people are already dealing with loss of property, disruption of daily life, and the pressure of temporary displacement, the last thing they need is a disease outbreak. As the days pass, the video transitions into scenes that capture the human side of the crisis. You see quiet moments where residents simply stand and watch the water, trying to understand how it rose from soil they once trusted. You see families carrying belongings to higher ground. You see a funeral procession weaving carefully between parked cars as though determined to maintain normal life despite the disruption. These moments remind viewers that behind every natural event, there are real people. People who must continue their routines even when disaster sits outside their front doors. And that brings us to the deeper lesson from this event. Manchester's vulnerability is not a mystery. It's geography. The parish is built on limestone. Its rivers are underground. Its drainage system is ancient and invisible. And its behavior is shaped by forces that most people rarely consider. This reality demands a different type of planning. Engineers cannot treat Manchester like parishes built on clay or granite. The solutions used in Portland or St. Andrew will not work here. Manchester requires geological maps that identify underground channels and sinkholes. It requires land use planning that respects those natural routes. It requires education for communities so they understand which areas are safer for building and which are risky during extreme rainfall. Climate change adds another layer of urgency. Storms like Melissa may become more intense and more frequent. That means groundwater events will likely occur more often. If communities do not prepare now, the impact will increase with every new storm. The land will not change its nature. The underground channels will not rewrite themselves. It is humans who must adjust. But this story is not without hope. Jamaica has a long history of resilience. Communities rebuild after hurricanes, after landslides, after droughts. Manchester has rebuilt before, and it will do so again. But this time, the experience offers a chance to approach the land with deeper understanding. The rising water and content was not a random accident. It was a reminder of how limestone landscapes behave. It was a sign that the underground world beneath Manchester must be respected, studied, and included in every conversation about infrastructure and development. The calm surface of the water in the final frames carries a quiet message. It tells viewers that the most powerful forces shaping our environment are often the ones we cannot see. It tells us that the land remembers old pathways even when we forget them. And it reminds us that nature does not always reveal its plans in the sky. Sometimes the real story lies beneath our feet. This is more than a flood. It is a lesson in geology, engineering, and the importance of living in harmony with the land. It is a reminder that understanding nature's hidden systems is the first step toward protecting our communities. And as always, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that uncover the science and mysteries shaping our world.